So, what can be said about the original Fully Cooling? It's a coming-of-age story about a 12-year-old boy trying to come to terms with his adolescence and growing up, while he feels everything surrounding him is pretty much tripping on LSD.
Already?
And that's how I interpreted Fully Cooling. That's how I viewed it when I saw the first episode for free on iTunes when I was in middle school. And that's how I interpreted it when I watched it again on Adult Swim on a Tsunami block when they were using it to promote the second and third season of Fully Cooling, progressive and alternative. And after the 6th episode, I can sit here and say that I was pleased. I really like progressive. I didn't think they did too much to separate itself from the first season. I think in some aspects it did better, and I think that it really didn't do bad. You know, I have a few nitpicks here and there, but not enough to really sit here and bash it. One of the reasons why I like the new season is how it told its story. I liked how it was more relaxed and it was more concise about how it presented itself, and it wasn't too over the top and it wasn't too crazy like the original was. And one of the scenes I liked the most from it is when after Hidomi watches Hide getting his ass kicked by a few thugs outside his home, when she goes over to give him his homework, he invites her over to talk to her for a bit, and after she mentions potentially wanting to go out with him, Haruko just suddenly just shows up out of nowhere in the house acting like she's filming a movie and just pretty much says, "Hey, I'm watching you guys, so you do you while I'm gonna go behind this door and just make fun of the fact that you guys might want to bang each other later." And speaking of Haruko, I can't get enough of what they did with her this season. She's a lot more funny and more energetic than she was in the first. And I really got into with the fact that she literally split in two halves at the end of the first season. So much so that we get introduced to a new character named Julia Jinyu, who's the polar opposite of how Haruko was. And she's literally the side that loves Animus and wants to protect the Earth from destruction, while the Haruko we know and love is the one that wants to get power no matter what way she does it, and doesn't really care about what she does to hurt people. And one of my favorite scenes of Haruko in Progressive is when she's a teacher, and more specifically when she was revealed as a teacher. Because all we saw of her at the beginning of the first episode was just this regular blonde woman who spoke in a very monotone voice, and was already talking about how even though she really didn't do much, that she already taught the kids there everything that they needed to know. And the very next scene that we see of her is, for whatever reason, just showing porn in a laptop to the kids in the school to see how they react. And then the very next day, after the first robot fight of the show, she starts talking in the same monotone voice as you hear right now, only for her speech to get more frantic and more eccentric, and only for her to rip the mask off of her face to reveal that it's Haruko teaching the class. That scene alone had me dying, and was one of the main reasons why I got hooked on the show to begin with. Like, it solidified right there, like, that it was gonna be an enjoyable show to watch. And Haruko aside, what about the two people that she's trying to use throughout the entire show, Hidomi and Ide? Well, I liked Hidomi and Ide. I like their dynamic. I like the fact that they're essentially polar opposites of one another. Ide is the one that's more expressive, more outgoing, and the one that's Haruko used first. And Hidomi is the one that she's trying to use to get to open up, but compared to him and, well, Naruto from the first season, she's a lot more quiet and reserved than anybody from the entire show. In fact, Hidomi's actually pretty depressed throughout the entire show, as if you couldn't tell from the beginning of the first 3 episodes in her dreams, when she's dreaming about how the world is decaying and that nothing happens here and that it's all hopeless, only for her to wake up and realize that everything that she saw wasn't real and that she has to go on living the same mundane life that she's used to living while not doing anything. Going back to the point about Ide and Hidomi being polar opposites, one thing I found interesting is that deep inside, Hidomi is the one that's expressive and more outgoing, and Ide is the one that's more reserved and more timid. But it's somewhat of a facade that both of them played because they don't know any other way to express themselves. It isn't until that they get to meet each other, and rather, well, Haruko introduces them to one another, ironically in her own weird way, that they slowly start to open up to one another. The final point I'd like to make as to why I thought Progressive was just as good as the first one was the tone that this second season had. I felt that in a few areas that it was more mature than the first one. Now, I'm not just saying that because I felt that there was not as many as wacky scenes as the first one, but that the scenes they did give you, that it felt more intense in a way. Like the scene where Hidomi's in her dreams and talk about how the world is decaying again. And how she mentions in one point that while she's flipped her personalities once, and after the 3rd episode, that she's pretty much suicidal. Haruko flat out eats her other half Jinyu in order to gain control of herself again. That's nothing we've ever seen in the first season at all. The worst that we got that was somewhat dark, aside from what the giant robot fights and the underlying themes of growing up, and maybe even Mamimi burning down the school at one point when she was younger and endlessly waiting on Naota's brother to come back. That's nothing the first season ever done, and I thought that was like a really interesting change of pace that the 2nd season did. Now, with all the positive feedback I've been given this 2nd season out the way, there are a few nitpicks that I have with it. With one of the main points being is Hidomi's father, more or less the lack thereof of him. Like, seriously, where the hell is he? He never makes an appearance at all throughout the entire show, and doesn't even show up at the final episode. The only thing we've known about him is that he works at medical. He gave those headphones to Hidomi to protect her for whatever reason. But other than that, we get no information about who he is as a person, what he's like how he interacted with Hidomi and her mother when they were Kanika, and that other than the fact that he just decided to leave one day for whatever reason. So my guess at this point is that he probably died off screen or something, or that he's off doing something else, he's cheated on them. Okay, I get what they were trying to do with Hidomi's father and how they're trying to replicate how Naota viewed his brother. At the same time, that's Naota's brother. He went off to do baseball. Hidomi's father went to go work or do whatever else. I think that being that a father is a more important role than a brother just going on and doing baseball, I thought they really messed up the ball on that one. And one other minor nitpick that I have with this new season is the fact that we didn't get any cameos from the first season characters. Like, yeah, we get to see a glimpse of them from the ending of the show, but other than that, we don't get them at all. And I get what they're trying to do again. They were just trying to have an all-new cast together with Haruko and 1 or 2 other characters helping out in the background. But I think the fact that it's been many years since the first season happened, that we at least get to know what the hell happened to him. Did Naota use that guitar to give it away to somebody? Did he become a musician? Did he get married? Did he have kids? What happened to him? But at the end of the day, they're just nitpicks. There weren't enough to deter my experience from the 2nd season, and I still enjoyed it pretty well. In fact, that brings me to my next point, my final point. Fooly Cooly isn't for everybody. It really wasn't at all. In fact, when people first heard of it and first saw it back in 2003 on Adult Swim, nobody knew what to think of it. They just thought it was LOL random humor of the show, and so they just kind of bashed it for not making any sense and just being kooky and weird for the sake of it. It wasn't until that people rewatched it and looked it over again that they found something more to it. They found that it was really special. They liked the animation, they liked the story, and they felt it was relatable. And that's why people stuck around to keep watching the show, and that's why they felt that Fooly Cooly was a masterpiece, or one of the greatest anime series of all time. Which is why when I heard about these criticisms for the 2nd season, that they were kind of baffling to me, because people felt that it wasn't just like the original, or that it didn't have too much the humor, or that the characters are kind of bland, or the animation for some reason was too bland. You know, maybe with the first episode or 2 you probably would have agreed, but things didn't start picking up until later on, and I think that was intentional. I think they wanted to have a build up of all the weird stuff before they went full force with it, and even then I think they did really well with what they had. In fact, I believe that if the show did add more random humor or any more other elements that the first season had that people were expecting or wanted in it, that the show would get lost in the shuffle in terms of the fact that people wouldn't be able to understand it more. I like this season because it's more easy to understand, and because of the scenes that they did add, that it made it more enjoyable. In fact, that's how I feel towards Incredibles 2. If I may go off topic for a little bit. Because to me, it isn't as good as the first one at all. It's still good in its own right. I like the animation, the story, and the interactions that it had. But in terms of being an improvement on the first, it really didn't do much at all. I find the villain in that movie to be really laughable, and her reasons for doing so really pathetic. Oh what, Supers indirectly killed your father. It wasn't their fault though, he's the one that worked with them. And you're gonna take revenge years later on people who just saved the city? Really? I would have liked if the movie took place years after the first one, considering that we waited 14 years for it. The way the movie felt, it felt like it came out 2 years after the first one, when it didn't. I just felt that they put too much focus on Jack having all these powers, and then to find out they really didn't do much with it, not even having him be the one being mind control or trying to attack the family or the city. I felt that it was a major downfall into me liking the second movie more than the first one. However, that's just my opinion. In fact, there's still people talking about how they liked the second movie more than the first one, and how it was like one of the greatest animated movies of all time. I personally don't see that. I personally see it as inferior to the first one. It's still a good movie, but not as good as the first. So, I'll leave my final thoughts on this. Fooly Cooly overall isn't for everybody. If you liked Fooly Cooly, then personally I would recommend you check out the second season. If you didn't like the second season, then you're better off checking out the first one. And if you want to give it another chance, the third season is on its way, premiering in September on Adult Swim. So, if I did have to give a score for Progressive, or rather the entirety of Fooly Cooly overall right now, I'd probably have to give this show about an 8.5. And to me, I found Fooly Cooly Progressive to be pretty damn enjoyable. Well worth your time.